thing that put us together. So in conclusion, what will I say? People want success. But a lot of us think that success is result in our life. And change, somebody mentioned it, so I'll quickly touch on it, though it caused me trouble in Abeokuta. In all that you do, the change you want the world to see, that is what Gandhi said. So if we in this country want change, we as individuals must show it. Our families will imbibe it. They will encourage us. And we will make our state and our country better. And who knows, we may even change the world itself completely. But we have to be determined. Government is for us, and we must be put in the governance. There have been a lot of problems in Nigeria. Let's don't hide about them. But I think government has a responsibility. If you want, back please, if you want these children, even for the sake of our children, to have hope, we have a responsibility to bring our people to dialogue. And where we are wrong, let's learn to say, forgive me, and you say, I forgive you. These three words are simple, but so complex, and yet so powerful, if we can agree to do that. The media, let me quickly, what I had there, that if you want the picture again, I'll go back a little bit. I think we should join the fun. If you do not, then the children will not have a job, they don't have anything, then they will do what is happening, and we are reaping it today. We are seeing them today. What is happening? Children and father, you know better than me. So, because they feel if you join the public one, you will never be arrested, and if you are arrested, they will use good name and connection, and you will be free. So the media has a big role to play. I've been told that the media in Nigeria is the journalists in Nigeria are the worst paid in Africa. That's what I read in one report. And that is killing investigative journalism. People write a paper, give you brown envelope, we go and publish. People want to defend themselves or want to use statistics to tell lies. They will craft things, sign, give you brown envelope, you go and publish it. So we don't know the truth. And once you don't know the truth, we become follow. So I think our government also needs our support. They need our prayer. Media and all of us, we should constructively criticize government, not in the way of destroying our country. One person said that it's better to tell a half-truth than to tell the whole truth that will destroy your country. And if we all do the things we have said, and I'm sure what my two other speakers will say, I believe we'll be at a place of dignity on the world stage, what Tafawa Balewa said in 1960. And we will allow merit to guide us. We will remove godfatherism, favoritism, or sycophancy. I want to leave you with this. We should all do what we can, by all the means we can, and in all the ways we can, to make this country a better place. And for those in position of leadership, and people should understand, leadership is not only the president and the vice president. All of us, even in our homes, we are leaders. If our homes fail, the country cannot stand. If all the homes are bad, the country will be bad. If all the homes, the villages, the district, the state are good, the president and the vice president can go to sleep. And we should remember what President Buhari said many years back, that this is the only country we have. Those who have dual or triple citizenship, they are very few. The majority of us, this is the only country we have. We must salvage it and make it work. So we must plan purposefully, prepare prayerfully, proceed positively, pursue persistently. Finally, and my due apology, I've taken 5 minutes longer. Next, please. I just want to leave you with this. Security and development are interdependent and mutually reinforcing. Sustainable development is not possible if there's no security. And security itself is not possible if there is no development. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Chairman Sir, ladies and gentlemen. As I have been introduced, I must start first with a disclaimer because the many interactions I've had with the Vice President, he knows me as the representative of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In this event, I am not representing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Rather, I'm speaking as a Nigerian woman, a physician, and a social activist. When I was asked to be part of this panel, I kept asking myself, and I tried to get Kabiru to find out why me. Nobody could answer the question, why me? But perhaps from my perspective, the only reasons I could see was, one, I'm a woman among men, so gender equity, 33%, so tick. The second is, I'm not aware if they knew, but by the time of 1966 coup, I was 6 months old, so I was crawling. And so perhaps my whole life has been from 66 crawling, and so therefore I've had the 5 decades from knowing nothing to what I am today. But most importantly, probably because they knew the other side of me, concerned about social justice and inequity. And so therefore, I'll beg to take a slightly different stance, and I've been offered 5 minutes extra. So if whatever our distinguished general took, I'll add 5 minutes. So this was because I'm a woman. In 1966, which was the year that ushered military rule, the coup would also lead to the Nigerian Civil War, which lasted 3 years. The idea for me is to look at the development of Nigeria as a post-conflict society and compare it to the development of Rwanda as another post-conflict society, and argue that development is merely a factor of leadership more than anything else. And leadership is not about building, it's not about roads, it's not about budget, it's not about income, it's not about GDP, it's not about rebasing economy, it's not about per capita income. Rather, development is about social change, is about social inequity, is about addressing social injustice. The address will look at various development indicators and compare them for the 2 countries, and then it will focus on poverty, health, education, and the status of women, which are my primary areas of interest. For Nigeria, a 6-year-old graduate from the colonial rule, 1966 marks the year that the first republics were replaced by military rule, the first in a series of changes in leadership. The coup in 1966 will eventually lead to Nigerian Civil War, which lasted 3 years. A war which was the culmination of what happens when ethnic diversity is treated as a means for division rather than of unity. 50 years on, it would seem that we are still held hostage by a lack of understanding which allows us to walk within our diverse nature rather than outside of it. For what is Nigeria? For me, what is a Nigerian if not someone who simply lives within the borders of this entity called Nigeria? 50 years on, Nigeria is still considered a post-conflict nation, meaning that we have not risen from the grounds that we fell in during the Civil War. In actual fact, we are still bridled by conflicts in all sorts. In fact, the fragmentation of our diversity is deepening, so much so that people not only see themselves along ethnic and religious divides, Nigerians have so deteriorated to seeing ourselves along states and LGAs. As an example, students in the universities in the 1970s, I was told, saw themselves along ideological lines, and so therefore, in ABU campus, you see the likes of Bala Usman on the one side and the capitalists on the other. In the late 1980s, when I was in the university, we were conglomerating along zealous religious groups. And in the 1990s and 2000, students have identities along states. Affected development in our country. Have we risen as a nation? Are we simply crawling? It is impossible to look at the development of Nigeria today separately from our colonial history. So is the same with Rwanda. The rise of the Nigerian nationalism would eventually lead to independence in 1960. The period between the two world wars saw the buildup of nationalism movement and the education of our future leaders. It was during these years that the basis of social and economic transformation of the country was laid, which enabled the 50 critical elements in the Rwandan success. Justice. I want to comment on what justice stands in Nigeria. As you know, if an armed robber comes with a gun and shoots, or comes to your house with a gun as an armed robber, and he steals from you, the likelihood of that person getting killed through our social justice system is high. Because he's what? He's an armed robber. If we have a pen robber who sits in an executive office and steals $1 billion, the maximum he or she gets in our social system is 20 years of imprisonment. And that is if the person has nobody to play on their behalf. This is the social justice we have. What does it encourage? That is something that the Rwandese have dealt with. The youth. Stringent efforts were made to build the Rwandan youths. What's happening with our youth? The Nigerian youth, if you look at it across the country, in the south, the youth are just busy organizing. The most lucrative trade is kidnapping. Who do you kidnap for the next 100 million naira? Now, what you even ask is in dollars. You look at the youth in the north, where you have the saddest situation. The youth in the north sleep all day and wake up in the evening and roam around the street, buy more codeine, and drink codeine in the night. There's hardly any extended family in northern Nigeria that does not have one young man or young woman that has drug addiction. Yet, we hide. Yet, we look the other side. Yet, we pretend that there's nothing wrong. Now, the fear is that it might just have happened in Borno and the Northeast, that the youth were ignored, they were used by political class, and that culminated in the different brands of Boko Haram and political haram. What we have now is that if we do not look at the issue of the youth, a situation will come where you and I will no longer be at peace. Even in this comfortable area, Abuja, where we think we're safe, I don't think it's true. If we do not look at the issue of social justice, we need to realize that the social justice we're looking about is about our driver, is the cook in my house, is the security man in my guard. My daughter gets taken to school by a driver. Who feels unsafe in this country? Who feels a sense of inequity? My house is guarded by a guard man. Who feels a strong sense of inequity? My cook belongs to the same category. And I think I'm safe. We're joking. Addressing the issue of social justice is no longer about being altruistic, it's about survival. If we do not, we've had a couple of women being taken hostages by their staff, killed, taking a couple of millions and put in their freezers. 3 have been recorded in this country. A couple of men will go down the drain as well. So for me, the issue of social justice is not an issue of being good. It's an issue of survival. We either do it or we all go down the drain. There's no two ways about that. I'll leave the issue of economy to Professor Soludo, but I'll take the issue of governance. Since the genocide, Rwandan government has been led by Paul Kagame, who is my hero, a Tutsi growing up as a refugee in neighboring Uganda. Kagame led the Rwandan Patriotic Army in its resistance against the Hutu militias, wreaking carnage in the country. After the genocide ended in July 1994, he became vice president and later rose to the position of a president. Last year, he did exceptionally well by every standard, by every analysis. Everybody declared him the best president of his time, the best economy of their time. Last year, the Rwandese decided to change their constitution to make sure Kagame stays. A lot of the countries of the world are busy criticizing and abusing him. I wonder, who says 4 years is a magic word? Whose definition is 4 years? If the Rwandese decide that they are at a stage in their development where they need the same leader to carry them through the same spirit for the next stage, who in the world has the right to tell them what to do? This, for me, is where Nigeria needs to go, a self-definition of identity. Stop being robots, and let's define our identity and what we need. Not just listen to what anybody says, because when the chips are down, nobody is going to come. When Rwandese were being killed, when they were busy killing themselves, nobody went to them. When we're busy killing ourselves in the Northeast, nobody came. It took President Buhari to keep running. Everybody was saying, can't he stay? He was running from country to country to country, trying to get support. He's still trying to get support. Nobody is addressing our South-South issues. So the truth is that nobody is going to answer our issues. We need to do it ourselves. The earlier we start defining our own identity, the better for us. Is this 5 minutes, including the bonus ladies 5 minutes? Because I really want to go to my conclusion, and I hope that everybody is going to get the 20-something page and read. Now, Nigeria, what has occurred to me, in looking at the 4 sectors, Nigeria had never liked ideas. If you look at the documents, the policies, Nigeria has one of the best policy in every sector. Every time there's something new, we quickly develop a policy. I remember I was in one of these international meetings somewhere in Africa, and the Nigerian country was not represented. Our ambassador quickly went there. We sat down, we helped him understand what was happening, and as soon as the documents were drafted, he went and signed. Nigeria was a signatory. We clapped and we went. The Nigerian government was not even there. So we sign to everything. We have the best policies. But where I struggle is we seem to misunderstand having policy to implementing policy. We see good policy as an end in themselves. This we need to move forward. I think we need to stop making new policies. We need to dust our policies. We need to see how to implement our policies. We should make mistakes. Mistakes are part of learning. When we do make mistakes, we will move on. In conclusion, Nigeria's promising future at independence cannot be understated. The failure of our system to rise up to the challenges that we face as a country is reiterated time and time again. Today, we are witnessing the reemergence of factions such as Boko Haram, who are so disillusioned by the idea of one Nigeria that they want their own state. The cries for Biafra, which seems never to have died down in the first place, is now being heard. In the oil-rich states, young people frustrated by their situation of poverty and inequity are turning into vigilante groups, kidnapping and vandalizing their environment, committing crimes, and nothing gets done. Young men and women in northern Nigeria are addicted to codeine. and codeine derivatives, sleeping during the day and roaming the streets in the evenings. On top of all these iniquities, on top of this, inequality between the rich and the poor is ever increasing. And we watch as elite class live at the expense of the masses. All this coupled with ineffective government, time and time again forces us to ask, what went wrong? What are we doing wrong? What can we do to fix it? If Rwanda can do it, I believe we can do it, and we can do it even better. When we have an effective and sincere leadership, and I mean effective and sincere leadership, a leadership invested in development of a nation, the children will go to school, receive good quality education, and become leaders of great caliber who possess the will, the capacity, and the ability to nurture our growth. Our healthcare system will improve with the times and become accessible regardless of social class. The majority of people will be living above poverty lines and with decent 3 meals in their families. The irony is that people only get leaders that they deserve, meaning that we are all responsible for the action or inaction of our leadership. They are corrupt because we either encourage corruption or we tolerate it. They are inefficient because we condone inefficiency. And above all, our leaders are not serious because we all are not serious. When we have leaders that believe in the entity called Nigeria, perhaps we're going to have a country where we develop. In my whole lifetime, I'm 50, so in my adult lifetime of probably the last 30 years, I've seen probably less than a conglomeration of 36 months where I believe we've had leaders that believe in this country called Nigeria. I do not believe that we've had enough of. And until such a time where we individually believe in this country, where when I'm asked, Miro, who are you? I'll say I'm Nigerian. And when I'm asked, I'll say nothing else. If you go around this hall and you say, who are you? Where are you from? You start hearing, people don't even say I'm from Katsina State. People say I'm from, is it Daura or Katsina Central or something. And as you even see leaders, look at any governor in this country. Majority of his kitchen cabinet are from his local government or his senatorial district. Is this how we hope to develop? In my opinion, no. Until we begin to call a spade, and until we begin to be honest with ourselves, I'm afraid we still have a long way to go. But as an optimistic Nigerian, I believe that the change, Mr. Vice President, that we're talking about is really a change around social justice, social equity, but above all, that you guys will show us by example that you truly believe in this country called Nigeria. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vandera, for this inspiring speech. I now call on my neighbor, Professor Hululu, to address us.
Did you say 50? Well, I was asked to speak. Mr. Vice President, the Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have been warned even before now that I didn't have to make a long speech, and true to type, I assure you, I haven't got any written paper to give you. I will only make a few comments on the ones that I haven't delivered. That's the first point. The second point is that we have a saying in my place that someone is called upon in a meeting to speak, and it simply says, others have said what he wanted to say. So at this point, with General Awai and Dr. Mandara, I can always say they have said what I want to say. But let me just go straight to make just a few extempore comments. I just, early hours of this morning, I just scribbled 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points to speak to. And I will just go to them. A question is asked, is Nigeria rising? And I want to go ahead and maybe give my perspective in answering that question. The first is to say that I believe Nigeria seems to have, to some degree, been going in circles. That's my first point. And I just want to read 2 things for you. Quote, the aim of the Revolutionary Council is to establish a strong, united, and prosperous nation, free from corruption and internal strife. Continue. Our enemies are the political profiteers, the swindlers, the men in high and low places that seek bribes and demand 10%. Those that seek to keep the country divided permanently so that they can remain in office as ministers and blah, 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 the tribalists, the nepotists, and so on and so forth. End of that one. That was Nzogo's speech in 1966. Read Gowon's speech, January 15, 1970, to accept the surrender of Biafra, and you see the same trends. I've tried to read the speeches that were made after every change of government in Nigeria since independence, the Tafawa Balewa's independence speech, and all through all of them. But this particular one, I just want to refer you just a few sentences. January 1, 84, General Sani Abacha. Blah, 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 blah. We are all living witnesses to the great economic predicament and uncertainty which an inept and corrupt leadership has imposed on our beloved nation for the past 4 years. I am referring to the harsh, intolerable conditions under which we are now living. Our economy has been hopelessly mismanaged. We have become a debtor and beggar nation. Blah, 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 blah. Well, in some states, workers are being owed salary arrears of 8 to 12 months. And in others, there are threats of salary cuts. Yet our leaders revel in squandermania, corruption, and indiscipline, and continue to proliferate public appointments in complete disregard of our stark economic realities, blah, 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 blah. You can read quite a few of this. And as you read this, we're talking about post-66. Are we rising? The first thing is to, so I share in the dismay that's been expressed by the 2 previous speakers. You know, in some sense, we seem to be going in circles. The cup is half full than half empty. It's our favorite pastime as Nigerians. We only have a catalog of the wars. It's part of us. But I remain optimistic and hopeful that this potentially largest, currently the largest black nation on earth, and potentially one of the largest economies in the world, can keep rising. Yes, to answer the question, is Nigeria rising? I will say my answer is a qualified yes. With oil as the oxygen, and more than $1 trillion from oil, and which has managed to keep the looting elite, united and organized, and managed to keep our economy fueling. Today, the Nigerian economy, in my view, yes, relative to our potentials, it has underperformed. Relative to our potentials, it has underperformed. But is the trend upwards, especially in economic terms? Yes. The HDI and all the other things, they are not looking very pretty. But again, you go to where we are coming from. It's about $550 billion economy with a per capita income of 2,700. Relatively, with the recent rebased economy, relatively more diversified. Relatively, I said this. A dysfunctional diversification that has bypassed the manufacturing. You see, the services now dominate. We've gone from primary to services, bypassing manufacturing. We have one on nation state. We've managed to keep Nigeria as one country. That was the goal of the 1966 coup, to keep us one and prosperous. But we have failed to build a nation. We still have a divided country with multiplicity of nationalities pulling in different directions. On corruption, as you saw from that first speech, we've moved from 10% to sharing a whole security budget, and so on and so forth. But relatively improved on the corruption perception index. The challenges are enormous. Urbanization, terrorism, unemployment, inequality, exacerbated poverty, and so on and so forth. But so also are the potentials. This country is projected, PwC, Citibank, chief economists, and so on, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that by 2050, this country is projected to be between the 6th and 9th largest economy in the world, with a size of between 7.5 to 9.5 trillion. And we would then be like a middle-income country. The population is projected to be about 440 million people by 2050. 440. And that will make us the third largest country in population terms in the world by 2050, just behind India and China. A big question, in other words, the potentials are there. These are some projections, but for me it's a linear projection. I mean, never mind about how they got computed all of those. Yeah, so I'm just saying this as a footnote, that we have potentials to become even bigger, to rise. But this cannot happen on its own. It depends on what happens today. The choices we make today will determine whether we go up or down. The challenges are immense. I've listed quite a whole number of them, including the fact that the commodity super cycle that actually propelled, became the oxygen that kept us going for a while, is over. And it's not likely to return anytime soon. And so for us to begin to think of a post-oil economy is the agenda that unfortunately Professor, the Vice President, and his team are called upon at this historic moment to undertake. The party is over, and you have to lead us to a new way, new path, with the destination still there, but you need new instruments and new techniques to take us there. I have quite a number of that I wouldn't even want to bore you with domestic challenges and so on and so forth. But there is something I want to draw your attention to, because people often talk about agriculture. Agriculture now accounts for about 22% of our GDP in terms of the structure. Great potentials. This country has about 930-something thousand square meters, a third of, say, a country like Congo. But about 35% of our land is under threat of desertification. Interestingly, it is the area that has the largest land mass, especially northeast. The 12 or 11 states that are mostly in danger of the threats from Boko Haram and so on happen also to be the places with the greatest threat of desertification and under pressure to migrate. And with the issues of citizen-settler conflict in the next 50 years, the question is, where will Nigerians live in 2050? We're going to have a lot of migration. What's the potential for agriculture with only about 1% of the agric land under irrigation? So I ask a question. If oil and gas and agriculture and even solid minerals, we're going to have very limited impact on employment generation in the near term. The question is, which sectors will provide the jobs for the 440 million people by 2050? This is even more so, especially given that we have one of the highest urbanization rates in the world at about 5.3%. But we have bypassed manufacturing. This is a question. So for this you can write big books, as it were. But let me just quickly say a few things as we think about the next Nigeria. After 2015, nevertheless, what my friend Issa thinks that Nigeria didn't start in 1914. Well, the amalgamation took place in 1914. Africans were still moving around before then anyway, but Nigeria was born in 1914, I insist. So 2014 was the first 100 years. How do we go the next 100 years? That is the big question. And I think our underperformance in the past, in my view, was as a consequence of some inconsistent instruments, dysfunctional institutions, and predatory politics. The Constitution that we have is designed for sharing and consuming the oil rent. It is not one designed for production. I'm not sure how far you can go by, we fix roads, we fix infrastructure, and everything will happen. It won't automatically happen. We have a dysfunctional system, a dysfunctional institutional foundation. So you take 10 steps forward and you take 11 back and you start again. So Nigeria will need skills, technology, and infrastructure, plus institutions and their strategy to unleash a new competition. If the horizon in the next Nigeria is going to be sustainable, there is a regime shift. The oil is over. We are now in a new era. And that new era, fortuitously, coincides with the coming of a new government. But with the prof leading the charge on the economy, I think we can be more confident. There are ethnic nationalities and still the inconclusive search for nationhood. We have been in denial, I believe, as a country. And I believe that Obafemi Awolowo and Sardauna were right. We need to talk. I believe Nigeria has been building a 100-story building on a quicksand. And we're seeing what is going on now. Nigeria is ranked now for about 4 or 5 consecutive years as number 5 on the failed state index. Many people don't seem to pay attention to this, but the world does. The world is going in different directions. If we have to plan, my first point, Mr. Vice President and ladies and gentlemen, is that Nigeria is an inconclusive federation. It's an inconclusive federation, and Nigeria needs a coherent nationhood plan or agenda for a more perfect union. That should be the starting point. My thesis is that we must be able to combine perestroika with glasnost. So that's talking in the Russian Federation's parlance. Trying the economic agenda under the new regime without the political architecture, we will be building on a quicksand. We are not building to last. We need a coherent, consistent economic agenda. Mere nationalism or some emotional populism will not substitute for a rigorous economic agenda. A post-oil economy in the context of current challenges and realities of the global economic system requires new tools to overcome. For starters, ladies and gentlemen, my view is that to craft this new agenda, we must defeat the old, tried but failed economic policy agenda. We cannot make progress in the 21st century with the tools and ideas of the mid-20th century. Many of these have been tried in our history, they failed. They have been tried elsewhere in the world, they failed. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. And so what I think about the challenge of overcoming what I call insular intellectualism, or the so-called Nigeria's exceptionalism. Nigeria is so different that supply curve slopes downwards and demand curve slopes upwards, and so on. We are so different that the basic fundamental laws of economics that have propelled the East Asian economies and the other emerging economies won't work here. We've got to get something and go back to the 1940s and 50s. It hasn't worked anywhere, and we can't go back to the past. Rigorous empiricism must be the guiding post rather than partial analysis. So defeating old bad ideas can even be more important than thinking of the new ones to come. And history beckons on the new government. The government is challenged to be innovative and to have a transformational change, but without oil. But there is yet a second thing, I believe, where I don't envy this government. It's both a challenge and an opportunity. This is going to be the first government that will probably undertake a transformational change, but without the external agencies of coercion and reward. There's no IMF conditionalities or World Bank conditionalities. The debt relief is over. You have unfettered policy space. It's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge. And I want to say that the government, from what I can read, seems to have its heart in the right places. And no doubt has ample compassion and populism. On the one hand, struggling with the need to take some bold, audacious steps to re-engineer a broken system. This is a democracy, so we understand the dilemma. You have the next election to go for in the next 3 years. You don't want to rock the boat, otherwise the people will come after you. But that is the dilemma, Mr. Vice President, ladies and gentlemen. You have 3 budgets, 3 annual budgets to the next election to begin to do all this change that we're talking about. One is already almost gone. But I must say, my view, not very flattering, is that the current budget under consideration is largely a missed opportunity, and in my view, largely more of the same. Yes, it contains some tinkering, some good innovative ideas, tinkering at the margins here and there in terms of programming, and I applaud the government on employment of 400,000 or 500,000 teachers, free education for some selected sectors, and fighting corruption and all of that. Wonderful. A couple of innovative ideas there, which I applaud. I also appreciate the haste with which this was prepared. But the budget remains largely minuscule. I see some people describe it as expansionary. No, it is not. As a percentage of GDP, because you have to scale it. It's not in nominal terms. The nominal GDP has gone from 90-something to 100-and-something projected for the year. So if you scale your budget as a percentage of GDP, it's not any different from the previous budget. It's still 5 point little thing of GDP. Not expansionary for an economy in the state in which we are. It's just about $20–30 billion, depending on the exchange rate you use. Maybe the fire department of New York's budget or so. It's less than $150 per capita per citizen. But it has a historic 37% budget deficit within it. We have never had it before this way. Unlike before, the total recurrent budget is still higher than the total revenue. That's the 30% is for capital. That actually hides quite a lot. The truth is that your recurrent, you are borrowing 37% of the budget. I mean, deficit is 37% of the budget, whereas capital is 30%. The implication is that 7% is actually going into recurrent. So we are still borrowing for recurrent, just the trend within the previous. And I said to myself that this is seriously a missed opportunity to set new bold ideas for a post-oil economy. An alternative budget, I believe, with different tax and exchange rate configurations, waste management, could get you 10 to 15 trillion naira budget for starters. I don't know any country or many countries in the world, even in Africa, whose annual budgets, even when you combine states and the federal budget, it's still barely about 10% of our GDP. We should be moving towards 15, 20 for the kind of transformation that is being promised. Yes, the next key, I don't think I want to continue on this. I'm looking at my time. But I just want to say, ladies and gentlemen, I was asked by the moderator things I was going to talk about the exchange rate and central bank and so on and so forth. I would disappoint you. I will avoid that part. The only bit I can say is to thank the government and the central bank for what I call the preliminary step it has taken in trying to dismantle the strangulating coterie of ad hoc restrictions that are hemorrhaging the economy. I think the first step in trying to dismantle some of this should be commended. Days or weeks to come, because my hypothesis is that if you continue along that path, the economy will be underperforming by at least 2% of GDP. That's my computations. And it's a dangerous route to go. We can do something bold, audacious, and get the economy back on a track. In conclusion, I just want to say, like I said, mine is just to make comments, a quick haphazard comments here and there. Commend the government for what is going so far. I think its heart is in the right direction. The fighting corruption is a very good one. I say the compassionate component, the social programs being put in place, albeit that we urge them to be sure that they plan before rollout. They have the facts and not go back to planning without facts. I think the minimum wage announced by the previous government was announced at a function before somebody did the numbers. Well, I know the labor guy, I know where you guys were, and urge you, this government, at an auspicious time in our history, there's no question you love Nigeria, but you need the right instruments. The drumbeat has changed, the dance steps must have to change at a fundamental bit. With all this, I have absolutely no doubt, if we can get our political and economic reform agenda simultaneously pushed through, you would have laid the foundation for the next Nigeria. Thank you very much, and God bless.
I'll now call on the MC to introduce the Vice President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the privilege. And on an introductory note, let me quickly allude to a few things I heard some of the speakers say. Particularly, they keep dumping the things at the feet of the media. Yes, the media has a role to play. And one privilege that we have in the media is that we are able to speak the truth to power if we want to. But do we?
Sorry, I have to cut you. I asked you to introduce the Vice President.
That's what I'm doing, sir.
Oh, no, you are not doing that.
That's what I'm doing, sir. I'm leading up to that. Yes, sir. So, because some of these things are the things that the VP will also have to address. So thank you very much to all the speakers. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the honor to introduce the Vice President. Of course, the Vice President needs no further introduction. He's already been introduced and over-introduced. And like we said, it is his preference to speak after he has listened to everybody who spoke. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, may you, with a round of applause, welcome the Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
Thank you very much. Please sit. Thank you. The chair of this occasion and former head of the civil service, Alhaji Adamu Fika. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance today. I intend to make use of the library, if you will permit me. I've already asked a few people who know how to get there. The former minister of the Federal Capital Territory, who is also here, Dr. Aliyu Umar Modibo, and the chairman of Media Trust, our host. I'd also like to thank you very much for this great opportunity to be here. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I will just speak randomly. There's so much that there is obviously to comment about and to speak about, but I'll just be as random as I can so I can cover as many points as I would like to mention. I spent a lot of my time, I spent a lot of years in the university and also practicing law, and the 8 years between 1999 and 2007 as Attorney General in Lagos State. Most of that time I criticized the federal government almost on a daily basis. And I recall that a few weeks ago I was talking to my wife and criticizing the federal government. And my wife had to remind me, but I thought you guys were now. Frankly, sometimes one tends to forget that, as they say, the buck stops somewhere around my table. But as I said to President Buhari while we were campaigning, and he said I should look at the faces of the young men who are pressing their faces against the bus that we're in Zamfara State. And he said I should look at their faces. He said, well, what do you think, what can you tell about these people? And I said, well, I really can't see much. I see that they're excited to see us. And he said, let me tell you what, as far as these people are concerned, from the second day that we're sworn in, after, if we win this election, they expect to see all their problems solved. So I said to him, I said, it is you they expect to solve the problem. But we know that, at least today I know that just as he reminds me constantly, we have a duty to do our very best, as honestly, as forthrightly as we can, using all of the best tools and the best things that all of the best people that we can find. The question today is Nigeria rising. For me, I think there is no question at all that despite everything, our country is rising. Despite all of whatever it is that we see, our nation is rising, but it's a severely challenged nation. First thing I'd like to say is that the development of nations anywhere is based largely on an elite consensus of one kind or the other. In other words, the elite must agree that the nation or the group is worth building. The elite must agree. The professional elite, the religious elite, the political elite must agree that there is something worth doing about the nation. And the nation is worth anything at all. And that consensus has been addressed, and issues around it have been addressed both by Mero and even earlier by General Agwai, that we need to find some kind we need to find that consensus. Unfortunately, that consensus has eluded us for very, very many years. And this explains why it is that despite all that we should have achieved as a nation, we appear, as Professor Soludo has said, to be going round and round in circles. It is an elite consensus that brought the great countries of the world where they are today. When you look at just simple things like the American Constitution or even the agreements to form a union, people came together, diverse tribes, diverse races and all of that came together to say, let's agree that this enterprise is worth pursuing. Let's agree on the values. Let's agree on the minimum that we will accept. Let's agree on a justice system. And let's agree that this justice system is one where none will be above the law. And then let's implement it rigorously. The individuals within that elite group may even disagree, as must be the case. But there must be no doubt at all in anyone's mind that unless there is within this geographical space, or this, if you like now, geopolitical space, unless we agree as to how to govern this space, as to how and what it will take to develop this country, we will always appear to be, as Professor Soludo has suggested, going round and round in circles. It's the absence of an elite consensus that has brought us to a place where people have dived into their ethnic conclaves. And just as Mero agonized, today we find some of our best minds, some of those who were great leaders in the past. I was speaking to a group of leaders from a part of the country just last week. Amongst them, retired permanent secretaries of great repute, retired they're professors who had taught in universities for many years. But they now came representing a little zone within a state, and for me, it was so depressing that we find ourselves, and it is because of the failure of that elite to define for us a future and to say this is how to get to the future, that everybody is now in their tribal zones. So I made a comment recently about place of residence being more important than indigenship, and I got a whole deluge of comments, people saying, only bastards will turn around and say that their ethnic groups or whatever it is may not matter. But the truth of the matter is that while we are proud, or while we are proud of where we are from, it is impractical, completely impractical, to assume that any form of ethnic nationalism in a country such as this is what will take this country forward. Whoever it is that says, I want to go my own way, you know, whether it is the southwest, southeast, northeast, wherever, is bound to find that the reason why Nigeria is an attractive proposition, economically at least, is because of our size. That's the reason why we're an attractive proposition. Look at all the small countries around us. The reason why we are this great country to them is because we have a huge market and the possibilities are limitless. That is the reason. So any tiny little country, and you know, when I heard, you know, when we talk about, you know, some of these countries, you know, Rwanda, Botswana, and all of these countries, now many of them are setting great examples of good governance. But when you look at actual numbers, these are tiny countries compared to Nigeria, tiny little countries compared to Nigeria in terms of actual numbers. Lagos State, you know, is larger in terms of its economy than about 12, 13, or 14 African countries. Lagos State alone. That's put together, exactly, put together. You know, so we're dealing with the sort of country that we're talking about is a country that has the potential to be not just the giant of Africa, but a major giant, economic giant in the world. That's the kind of country we're talking about. We can't, you know, sometimes, you know, the other day somebody was talking about Tanzania and all of that. And I said, look, Tanzania's IGR, its whole revenue, is still 1/6 of that of Lagos State. 1/6. I'm not talking of Nigeria, 1/6 of Lagos. So it's these countries, as I said, offer good example. Many times when when countries do well, we're bound to speak well about them. And, you know, a lot of these countries have shown great example. But I think it's important for us to understand that we have a duty, and here I refer to the elite, to ensure that we are able to deliver a nation. And this I think is a challenge that we face in the coming years. As Meru has said, is a leadership question. And that and leadership is not just political leadership. It's not just political leadership. It's leadership, it's religious leadership. It's leadership in education, you know. It's leadership across the whole spectrum. Now, the other thing that I'd just like to mention is with respect to what I think we may need, what I think we need to do going forward. The problem sometimes is not as, and again, I like to refer to what Meru said about the capacity, about implementing our ideas. We have great policies, excellent policies, you know, and in practically every sector we have great policies. But what seems to me to be lacking, and what I've spent a lot of time trying to address, is the whole question of the state's capacity to perform, the state's capacity to do things. Now that has nothing to do with democracy, frankly. It is more a question of what is the capacity of the state to deliver on practically anything, even to build a road, to plan, to design a road, and to deliver a road, to plan, to design a bridge or railway and to deliver it, to plan a legal system that is effective, a legal system that protects private property, a legal system that is able to punish wrongdoing, and that can do so speedily, swiftly, and at least in a manner that is considered fair by most. It is that capacity that I believe we need to spend a lot of time developing. We need to develop that capacity. You know, when you look at it, some people say, oh, it's rich people who escape justice in Nigeria. It's not true. The truth is that everybody escapes justice in Nigeria, everybody, whether they are rich or poor. There's nobody who doesn't escape justice. If you look at our numbers in prisons, if you look at the prison numbers, just as an example, at the moment we have just over 12,000 convicted prisoners in Nigeria, just over 12,000 in all of our prisons put together, just over 12,000. And we are 170 million people. America has about double our number, 300 million people, and they have 2.2 million people in jail. 2.2 million compared to 12,000. So it's either we are very well-behaved people, you know, that we have that kind of small number, or there's something wrong with the system. So really the question is one of developing the capacity, and we need to work hard on developing the capacity. I think Professor Soludo talked about institutions, about building institutions, you know, but all those things can be done, in my view, and a lot of time, we're spending a lot of time thinking through this and trying to work through this. How do we ensure that we can deliver the kind of capacity that can do most of the things that we need to get done? And I think that one of the very important areas is fixing our justice system. Education is absolutely important. There's no running away. There's no way you can build a serious economy without investing in education. But not just investing in education. What exactly are the strategies? What exactly are we trying to do? What types of people are we trying to produce? What type of students are we trying to produce? We've been in debates and all sorts of questions around what can we do with our educational system. My frank approach to it, and the way that I've tried to push this, is that you don't necessarily need to fix the entire educational system all at once, but you must have clear